Welcome to another episode of Talk to the Fedora, chatting about hard-hitting, honest entrepreneur wisdom that you can use to grow your small business. I'm your host, Jarrod Goldsmith from eSAX Virtual Events, and today we're very pleased to be joined by Ciara Feely. Ciara shares a message of how sales strategy and brave moves can transform companies, lives, and culture. She believes in the power of connection and cultivating partnerships instead of transactional relationships. That is the future of sales. Ciara brings her warm Irish charm to everything she does. As a mother of twins, she's proud that she's managed to write a best-selling book when they were toddlers called Steps to Win in the Meetings Market. Voted one of the top 10 industry pros to follow by Social Tables, Ciara shares practical sales insights that land with an impact. Ciara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Jarrod. How's it going?
Very good. Thank you. Ciara, let's start by where are you calling in from, please?
I live in a tiny little village in the very south of Ireland. It's called Coolay, and it is in the heart of the Gaeltacht. And the Gaeltacht is the Irish-speaking area in Ireland. There's maybe about 4 or 5 areas that the native language of Ireland is still spoken. Would you like to hear a little bit?
I would love to, please. Yes.
Conas Atá Jarrod. And that literally means, how are you?
Oh, fab. I need to get my, I don't know if Google Translate actually does that dialect.
It does for sure.
That's excellent. Thank you, Ciara. Actually, I had a chance to tour Ireland many years ago when I was traveling with a band. It's a gorgeous place. Love to visit again.
Wonderful. So did you find the Irish audience a little bit different?
Some of my favorite memories were sitting in the bars.
We do love a good sing-song.
Ciara, let's begin. Thank you. By a little bit of your background. Who are you, and what is your business organization about, please?
My name is Ciara Feely, and I am an author and a sales leadership strategist. And in 2013, I designed the Steps to Win program, which is a client-centric sales training program on how to really sell according to how the client wants to buy. So it's putting the customer number one and designing a sales steps in accordance to what is the next step that they need in their buying journey in order to want to engage with you and buy.
That's such a nice way to go about it. Often we find that organizations, people, individuals, they try to sell, thinking it's better for them. But it sounds like, Ciara, you're approaching it from the buyer's perspective.
Absolutely. And it took me a while to figure that out, to be honest with you, Jarrod, because my background is working for large multinational companies, always in a sales role. And I realized when I started my own business and then when I went to the other side and became a buyer, that I had been trained to sell from the company's point of view and not according to how the client really wants to buy. So I kind of turned it all up on its head, and it took me a while. But I figured out these 7 steps, and I gained that clarity through writing the book, and really from there, from those 2-3 years of figuring it out, everything in my business has come from that.
And Ciara, let's talk about your origin story. I understand that entrepreneurship has been in your family for many years, many generations, actually, and you come from that sales background, but why did you decide to go into authorship?
Really because I wanted to reach a lot more people. I started my business in terms of the sales strategy training out of frustration. And it was originally in the hotel and the events world because I used to be in hotel sales. And then when I moved back to Ireland, I was in San Francisco originally in hotel sales. I moved back to Ireland and I became a buyer, and I was a venue finder. And so I experienced how a lot of people sold to me. And then I saw the mistakes that I made, even though I was, quite good in sales in my hotel days. And it frustrated me, and I really wanted to do something about it. So that inspired me to write the book.
Fabulous. And you touched a little bit on your background about business or entrepreneurship. Would you care to elaborate on that a little bit for our viewers, please?
Yes, well, when you asked that question, I was thinking about it, and I thought, even though for a good 10 years I worked in large corporations, my roles were always quite entrepreneurial. Like, I opened two hotels. One is the Omni San Francisco Hotel in downtown San Francisco, and I still consider that my baby. So I did a lot of new things, growing things from scratch. I started travel clubs within the hotel for business travel leaders, and that enabled us to sell up to nearly 6 million in business in the first year of the hotel opening. And bear in mind that we opened just about 2 to 3 months after 9/11. So it was a very challenging time in the industry, as you know, the industry has gone through in the last in the last few years. So to me, it was just normal to start my own business. I grew up in a small family business. My dad took over business that his dad ran, that his dad ran, that his dad ran, and I always just saw myself being in business, and that someday I would do my own thing. And when I moved back to Ireland, I worked for a company, and I realized that it just wasn't the right fit, and that was just the push that I needed for myself to start my own thing. So it was just a natural progression, really, one that I hadn't planned, but it's worked out.
Often we hear of family legacy businesses that the youth are encouraged or coerced in some cases to follow the footsteps of the parents. Did you find that was it something that you turned around and wanted to pursue, or was there some pressure from them?
No, well, I started my own business. It's completely different to my dad's business. My dad's business was the stone industry, and he was ninth generation. My brothers are 10th generation. But I do remember giving my dad a hard time when I was growing up, because the business was called Feely and Sons. And I was like, hey, why not Feely and Daughters? Do you know? They eventually did rebrand to Feely Stone, but no, I didn't see that my career was in stone. Although I do love rocks, and I have a funny story recently about rocks that really helped me to get what I wanted to get. So I can share that whenever you're ready.
Well, actually, I'm a big proponent of rocks as well. I'm an archaeologist by education. So please, I would love to hear this story.
Well, we managed to build a house in 2020 over the two lockdowns, and we had to let the house settle for a bit before I could build a big patio outside. So the time to do that was this summer. We needed to build a retainer wall, and for that, like, it's in the Irish countryside, and so I really wanted to be very natural. So I needed big rocks. And for the last year, I've been going around and spotting rocks in fields and asking people, hey, could I get that rock, please? So it was slow progress, but I needed a lot of rocks. And Michael, my husband, he ordered some kind of filler stone to start the patio job. And he said to me, he said, Ciara, just count the loads of stone when they come, go out and chat with Connie and make sure everything is okay. Connie is the name of the driver. And so I did. And on one of his last loads, I told him that I was looking for really big rocks to build a retainer wall. And he said, now tell me now what that's for and show me around. So I showed him around the garden, and he says, okay, he says, those are really hard rocks to find. He says, it takes a long time to pull them out. But he says, now that I know what you're looking for, I'll keep an eye out. So I said, great. And he looked down in the field that we were in, and he saw dandelions, the little yellow flowers. And he said, now tell me about those flowers there. They're weeds. And I said, yeah. He says, I've heard they're good for your health. And I said, I'm not 100%, but I believe it is to do with cholesterol, that they're good for, blood sugar levels and all of that type of thing. And he said, yeah. He says, yeah, but, how do you take them? And I said, well, I've heard of dandelion tea. And he said, yeah, but how do you make dandelion tea? Is it the flower you put in? Is it the stem? Is it the leaf? What part? And I said, well, I know that I have dandelion root in the house that I bought in a health food shop. But other than that, I really don't know. But he kept on going on about the dandelions. I'm like, why is he obsessed with the dandelions? So I said, you know what, Connie? I said, I'll research it. And when you come back next, I'll come in for a cup of dandelion tea, and we'll check it out. And he said, great, that'd be wonderful, you know. So he delivered the last load, and he came in for the cup of tea. So I'd made him 2 different types of tea, right? And we had a chat, and he enjoyed this. And he says, look, thanks a million. He says, I really appreciate that you took the time to do that. So that was it. He delivered the 10 loads, and I didn't think I'd see him again. And the next morning, I heard a big truck pulling up, and it was reversing in. And the next thing, he let go these big load of rocks. And it was Connie. And I went, oh, I couldn't believe it. I went out, and they're beautiful rocks. Like, you know, not everybody finds rocks beautiful, but these are beautiful rocks. They're perfect for the patio wall. And I said, listen, thank you so much. I really can't believe it. And he said, no, he says, I learn in different ways. He says, I could have researched that and I could have looked it up, but I wouldn't have learned how to actually do the tea. He says, you explained it to me. You showed me exactly what you did. And that's what I needed, you know? And so, you know, we offered, of course, to pay him for his time in finding the rocks, but he didn't do it for the money. You know, it took 3 to 4 hours of his time. And so me making that effort was what the connection that he needed. And I talk a lot about that in sales, that it's so important that you find that little thing that is going to make that connection, because it's harder and harder right now to open up conversations with clients, to get face-to-face with clients, to get them on the phone, to get them to call you back, engage with you, respond, whatever way it is. And sometimes it takes listening on another level that really helps to make that connection. So
you touched on very important points, Ciara. Like, the listening is such a lost art. I find so many people are just so interested in talking, trying to sell, but they don't listen as often as they should.
Absolutely. And it's a skill that I have been teaching a lot more and going deeper on for the last number of years, because I realized that myself. And, you know, when I was in sales, I realized now that I did a lot of the talking. And, you know, when I was in America, the Irish accent always helped. But I don't think I really listened on that other level. And it's so important, because otherwise, how do you know what the client needs? The client needs to walk away from a conversation feeling they get me. You know, I really feel that they understand my business and that they're interested. And a lot of I speak with a lot of buyers, and that's something that they tell me that really annoys them and frustrates them about any business, is that the fact that they don't feel listened to. And that's slowing down.
During COVID, how has that changed for trying to listen and create sales when you're not actually face to face with people?
Yeah, it takes more of an effort to listen online, and there's a lot more distractions. You know, like if I was in an in-person meeting with you, I'd never be on the phone at the same time, right? So there's a lot more distractions. You can be checking your email, you can be doing this and that, but it really does take a lot more focus. And I think that's a discipline, and it's something that that needs to be practiced. A wonderful way to tune in and to slow down and to practice your listening skills is to sit in nature and just observe, what are you hearing? You know, put away the phone. If you feel the temptation to take it out, just observe, okay, I'm feeling, I need to look at my phone, and just acknowledge that and put it away. But sit and just count, how many birds do I hear? Or even if you're in the middle of the city, just, what am I hearing right now? And just focus in. And I suppose it's really, a lot of it is about being present. And even right now, Jarrod, right, I'm looking into my camera. I'm not right now, I'm looking at you. Right now I'm looking at my camera. And so that is, a great technique for a client really feeling that you're zoned in on them, and that you're looking at them. It makes it harder, definitely, to have a conversation, because I like to look at your face instead of at the camera. But that's
well, you mentioned about the distractions. Absolutely, especially when you're on a virtual call. Yeah. People are checking their email, they're looking at the stock market, they're doing other things, they're replying, but it's that credibility. But going back to something you mentioned about walking in nature, listening, and paying attention to other things outside of business, that speaks to me of the work-life balance. It's that unicorn that people like to talk about, but much harder to achieve.
Mm.
Um, how were you able to address the work-life balance in your life?
Do you know, I really wasn't very good at it for a long time. And I would say I even put off having children for a few years because I just said, I'm just going to wait until I get my business to that next level, you know? And then all of a sudden I was 38, but then luckily I had twins, so I caught up very quickly. But I would say that it's of course it's a big area for clients. I've got, I suppose, more disciplined over the years, and I have started using my calendar more and just scheduling in certain things. So on, one day, like on Mondays, I like to look at my accounts, and I like to look at, plan my social media, let's say, for the month. And then on Tuesdays, I keep for my delivery days for my working with clients, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, sometimes Thursdays. It depends on the client. And Fridays then is when I do my outreach for my speaking gigs. So that's just for, setting up keynotes and doing that, because that's a very important part for my marketing funnel. And, going to events, I enjoyed going to events online. I got to meet a lot of fabulous people online. But of course, in person, you just can't, you can't beat it. Thursdays, I try to set aside my time for setting up conversations. So who do I want to have conversations with next week or in the next month, and making sure that I have them as part of my pipeline. And that's an important part of my pipeline, is starting conversations.
And I'm very pleased to see this. I mean, you touched rather on some of the processes that you do during the week. Having a structured, organized way to go about business. This I'm doing accounting. This I'm doing this. This is the other thing. I think the time management is all we have that we can control.
Yeah.
And I'm very pleased to hear that from you. Thank you. I think that's very valuable tips.
Yeah. And I think that's a great, what you just said there is, control what you can control. And the rest you just have to let be. But sometimes it takes just looking at that, on those days that your head just gets full and you're perhaps feeling a little bit overwhelmed. And sometimes it's a great exercise to just write down like a T and write, okay, this side, what can I control? And then this side is what I can't control. And I do that exercise with some of my clients. And, they're saying, well, I can't control the client making the decision. I can't control the economy. And I said, okay, well, let's look at what you can control. So you can control how you react to something, always. You can control what your sales processes are. You can control the sales tools that you're creating in order to attract the business. You can control your sales messages, and you can control how you are in a situation. So there's, that's more than 50%. So I think that's a good way to look at it.
And when life gets tough, go look for dandelions in the forest.
Why not? Come to Ireland.
So let's talk about some networking tips. One of my favorite subjects, because working in business means dealing with people.
Yeah.
Would you care to share some of your favorite networking tips, Ciara?
Yes, I just ran a workshop last week on how to prepare for IMEX, which is a really big event happening in Vegas. And the first one is, how do you prepare for it? A lot of people will just turn up and arrive to a networking event, and then you're really trying to figure out who's in the room. So there's a lot that you can do in advance in terms of, number one, if it is you have an opportunity of writing a profile, and you've a presence. Let's say you're going to a paid event, making sure that you manage what your presence is, your profile, your website listings and all of that kind of stuff. And the second thing is try and ask for a list. You won't get an email list, but you can figure out a lot more people that are going there. Ask the host. If you don't ask, the answer will always be no, right? And the third thing is use LinkedIn. Put it up on your social medias that you're attending X event, and if you're going, let me know. Have a conversation, because a lot of people will really appreciate if they're walking into a networking event. I know I'm going to meet with Ciara, and we said that we'd meet by the tea stand at whatever time, and I think preparation is a really, really important part of it, to know who's in the room and try and have a few appointments before you even go there, because you'll see that a lot of people have done that already, and you kind of might kick in yourself a little bit if you don't. And I think, follow up, you probably have a lot of tips yourself on follow up, Jarrod, but it's what is your process? What are you going to do that's going to help you to stand out, and make sure that that person remembers you, and that you're in their inbox in a relevant way. You might have during the networking event arranged to have a further conversation. If you feel you're chatting to somebody who this could be, a really good person to talk to more, whether they're an influencer, whether they're a potential client, whether they're somebody who is a lot of knowledge on a topic that you have a problem with, arrange to meet them the next week. Have a virtual meeting, whatever it is, and then make sure that happens. One of the most effective ways that I love to follow up is to do the old handwritten note, and I've got these printed up myself. It's a music note, which I'm sure you'll appreciate. It says Nota Beag, which is the Irish for little note, and on the back I have a little bit of information about myself and where I live in my community. And I just love to put something in the post, as we call it in Ireland, in the mail, whatever that might be.
Yeah, that's a lost art these days, is by sending a personal handwritten note. People love to get mail, and they don't get it very often, so it will make you remember. That's a brilliant piece of advice. And I would say in some cases, and we have other videos talking about this, online networking can, in some ways, be better than in person, because as you've already mentioned, you can search who will be attending events, finding them on social media, following them. Because, Ciara, if you're going to a conference that you're speaking at, and out of the blue, one individual starts liking 10 of your posts and starts commenting and engaging with you, by the time you meet them in person, you already have a connection of sorts with them. And rather than a complete stranger, you might say, "Oh, thank you so much for commenting on my post. Let's have a little talk in person." You give them more time because they've already taken the effort.
Yeah, and I just posted a video on that on LinkedIn last night. There's a number of other things that you can do. Engage in the conversation right now. Follow the hashtag for the event. See who else is going. And a number of years ago on Twitter, it was actually, I engaged with somebody who was going to a big show, arranged to meet with them, and I knew through following his conversations online that there was a certain topic that was of value to him in terms of the sales process. So we had a conversation around that. I stayed in touch with him. I interviewed him for my book. And just this year, that conversation has turned into a business opportunity. But no matter what, he is a great person to know.
Yeah. And that leads itself well to our next question, is the concept of collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe collaboration in your successes?
Collaboration has been a very important part of it for me, because number one, it can be lonely running your own business, right? And I certainly have a lot of weaknesses. There's certainly areas that I need to bring in expertise on. And so whether it's a paid collaboration, whether it's a mutually beneficial agreement, I think it is really, really important to have a few different perspectives and looking at a particular problem. I've seen it work very well for some small businesses that they get together and bid on a bigger piece of business, and that can be a very successful collaboration. But for me, it's really about that sharing of knowledge, and I'm lucky enough to be on what we call a board you can't afford. So I did a leadership program in 2018 with a fabulous group of women, and the majority of us, about 15 of us, we decided we really needed to stay in each other's lives. So we set up this board, and we, prior to COVID, were meeting up quite regularly, and then we moved it online, and now we're back to a little bit of in-person meeting as well. But we have a very active WhatsApp group, and at any stage you'll see one of the women put in there that they're dealing with this challenge. Has anybody come across this? And they'll get a flood of advice, which is fabulous, So absolutely, I think it's very important to surround yourself with positive people, with people who perhaps have expertise in different areas than you. And sometimes you just need them on a day that you're feeling low, and they'll help raise you up.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Being around other people who understand the lifestyle, may or may not understand the business, but there are some commonalities across the genres of entrepreneurship, and dealing with different personalities and having their wisdom is brilliant. So I think that's a very valuable tip. Thank you for sharing that. Speaking of tips, Ciara, I know that you're a specialist in sales. Why don't you talk a little about that book that you've recently published, and how sales can be applicable for a small business?
Absolutely. Well, the sales process that I have created is a client-centric sales process. So it's really all about designing your sales process according to how the client wants to buy. So I've designed it into steps, right? So, and it's about taking one step, getting that right, and then moving on. So the first step is how to stand out and sound different. And it's really how to separate yourself in that sea of sameness, and avoiding being a commodity, and avoiding having a transactional business, in particular if it's of a high value product that you are selling, or high value service. So we look at ways in order to do that, because the first problem that you have is how do I get the attention and the interest of a potential client? And you're not going to do that by sounding the same and being the same as everybody else. So those are tips and strategies in order to open up more conversations. And then the second part is, well, how do I actually lead this conversation? And it's not about taking an order, which a lot of client conversations can turn into, and then you may or may not hear back from them. It's about really being curious and really understanding the client and making it all about them. So it's, again, how do you lead that? There's 4 different steps that I teach in order to really lead that conversation and have a strategic conversation. The future of sales is about creating a connection, and the way that you lead this conversation, the questions that you ask are very, very important. And a lot of people will try to sell too early in the sales process. It may take a number of conversations. It may take a number of touch points before they're even ready to give you their time, because you have to earn people's time right now. And then the 4th step there on the conversation piece is, how do you end the conversation? What are your next steps? Do you always know when your next contact with that client will be? Because sometimes we either hang up the phone or say, yes, I'll send you a proposal, and then you may never hear back from them. And then the 3rd step is that proposal. So we're talking about sales tools here. How do you write a winning proposal? And if I may share, some of the biggest mistakes that I see in proposal writing is that the proposal tends to be all about, your company, your business, when it really needs to be turned on its head and it has to be all about the client. And how do you personalize it? Don't be sending quotes. I've reviewed thousands and thousands of proposals, and I see a lot of quotes been sent where just maybe the name and the date and the rates, or certain details like that are changed. How do you really personalize it so the client feels that it was created for them? So
Absolutely. When I send RFPs for my virtual events, I copy paste the list of questions that the client sends me, and I use each one as a header, and I focus on how the platform fits each of those boxes. That's
perfect. Yeah, that's a great way to do it too. Yeah.
something you mentioned earlier, Ciara, about how do you stand out. One of the first, I think, point number one. In my case, as a musician background, I would go to a lot of the chambers of commerce, the boards of trade in my area to get gigs, music originally. There were a lot of suits at those events. I thought, how do I stand out? I started wearing this hat, and it's become such a big part of my brand. I can't go anywhere without it. My business cards are fedoras, and but and I'm encouraged to hear more wisdom like that in a sales book. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I use clothes as well as a way to stand out. It's about conversation openers too. It could be a great way to start a conversation with a complete stranger. They might admire something, or they might feel you're a little bit more approachable
Yes.
when you're not looking like everybody else.
But that lends itself to branding. Not everybody has a personal brand or a business brand. Would you care to share some tips on branding?
Well, I'm definitely not the expert. I got it wrong for a lot of years, and I really tried to do it on the cheap. I tried to do it myself, or I tried to just engage the printer and you do me up the logo and you do the whole look, instead of actually sitting back and deciding what's the story that I want to tell and what is important to me, and really stripping a lot of things back and getting to the core of that. So I think in the last few years, I have a brand that I'm proud of, and that represents me a lot more, while still ensuring that it attracts the kind of clients that I want it to attract. It's not everybody that you want to do business with, and I think a good exercise to do is to profile your clients. Who are the types of people that you love to do business with, especially when it's a small business. Who gives you joy? Who do you do your best work with? And very importantly, who's a profitable client? Who is your most profitable client that you have right now? And is there another type of client that you would like to have? Small businesses absolutely need to be looking at profitability and getting that balance right between the kind of clients that really respect your business, that see you as a partner, and see you as a trusted advisor and a consultant, and then they don't mind paying for the value that you bring to the table. But that's all the kind of stuff that you need to be putting out there, and first of all, getting clarity on. I think a lot of people who start out in business like, take anybody, any customer, and sometimes then that just brings you down rabbit holes, or you end up, oh, this is not what I started my business. And it's about really finding the clients that you can do your best work with.
That's such an important part. Not everybody's a client of yours. Do a profile. I would like to wrap up a few more questions before we leave today. Let's talk about some successes that you're most proud of.
Definitely bringing two babies into the world safely at the same time. When I had my twins, that I would say is one of my biggest successes.
Yeah, and that's such a. I can't imagine what would be involved with that, but from what I can tell, you've done a great job, Ciara. What about some failures? And perhaps we could talk more about the business side. Do you care to share any thoughts or wisdom?
I could write a book on how not to run your business. It won't be my next book, but I could definitely write one on that. For me, it wasn't putting in proper processes at the very beginning and really disciplining myself in order to do that. I'm a creative person. I get distracted easily. I'm like, oh, I'll do this, I'll go here, I'll do that, I'll do there. So in the last number of years, I have been more strict in putting in processes and systems and automating what I can. Because let's face it, you cannot do it all really well yourself. So it's looking at technology, looking at your customer relationship management systems, looking at your website and your marketing, even your bookkeeping and accounts. What can you automate and yet have your brand and your personalization in there in order to help funnel people into that conversation piece. So in sales, it can take 12, 13, 14, 15 touch points for somebody to put up their hand and say, yeah, now I'm ready to have a conversation with you. But you can't be following up 15 times with different people, so it's how are you designing the experiences that they have with you before they are ready to have that conversation or to buy.
And it really is an experience. Like the buying process shouldn't just be transactional, like you've already mentioned. It's an experience.
Absolutely.
So, Ciara, let's talk a little bit about the future. Where would you like to be in a year or two from now?
Well, I do my best work working with clients, working with their teams, and really transforming their sales results. So I definitely want to stay in that area. Sales enablement is a big area that I'm getting into with some slightly larger companies also. And there's another book in me. So Jarrod, I have started to write that book, and I'm doing a lot of interviews right now with generally bigger buyers to really figure out what is it that helps them to want to say yes.
Excellent. I look forward to reading that at some point, Ciara. Let's talk about final wrapping up question. Some words of wisdom for small business.
I would say stick your neck out. Don't. Sometimes we can have that imposter syndrome, and sometimes we can talk ourselves out of not being brave and making a bold move. Dare mighty things is a quote that comes to mind from Teddy Roosevelt. And I talk about that in some of my keynotes. The man in the arena is the speech that it came from, and the credit and the greatness of man is in taking action, and not in the person who's sitting back and saying, oh, hey, look at that person, So it's taking action. And I think not waiting for everything to be perfect. Sometimes action is just what's needed to get the ball rolling. I had an incident, I would call it, happened to me when we started building our house in 2020. We had mortgage approval, but we didn't need to actually start it or draw it down until we were into the build. But then when I saw COVID happening and all of that, I says, I'm just going to secure the mortgage. So I drew it down, and then I didn't need to draw down money for a number of months. And we built a timber frame house, and in July of 2020, literally the house was arriving on the back of a truck. And I went to draw down the next amount of money, and the bank told me that they weren't going to continue our mortgage. And I was in complete shock. I says, we have a contract, and I just wasn't quite sure what to do. So the first thing I did was I had a call with this board you can't afford. And I told somebody. So I told the girls, and they're like, I can't believe this. It doesn't make any sense for a self-build that, that they wouldn't continue the mortgage, because we already had half a house built at this stage. So my accountant called me. She was on that board, You Can't Afford. She called me after and she said, Ciara, there's a few things we can do. We can borrow money through the company. We can do this. We can do that. And I says, I'm going to fight it, So that's what I did. I decided to talk to somebody else. I talked to a few different people in around the banking area. And I was told you first have to put it in writing. So I said, I'm going to go to the top. And I went to the CEO of the bank, and I wrote her a personal email from the heart, but very sensible and business-like also. And it worked, because I got an email back within 2 hours to say that the relevant people were looking at it. And then I called my mortgage broker, who was fabulous. He was absolutely fabulous to work with. And I said, I'm sorry, Shane, now, but I went over your head. And I went to CEO of the bank, and he said, Ciara, I know. He said, anybody who's everybody is working on your case. So it took about a month. I really had to stick my neck out. I still had to prove that we could pay the mortgage no matter what. But they completely reversed their decision and honored the mortgage, So I've heard stories since of a lot of people who just accepted that the bank said no and didn't stick their neck out, didn't fight it. So
that's such an equatable lesson for entrepreneurship. You've already mentioned, go stick your neck out. A lot of people take no as face value, but as an entrepreneur, we have no choice. We want to make it work. We have to make things work. Find ways. There are ways.
Go around it, go over it, go under it, whatever. You may hear no a lot, but if you know in your heart that this is the right thing, then figure out other ways, and don't be afraid to talk to other people. Like, I figured out that I had a process in the whole business of sticking my neck out and getting the business decision reversed. So that is something that I'm proud of. But as my mother would call it, my dad would be a little bit more cheeky. My mother would be a lot more reserved, and my mother calls that's the Feely neck, Ciara.
Ciara, thank you so much. I wish we had more time to go into more detail on some of these issues, but how can somebody get in contact with you, please?
Yeah, ciarafeely.com, CIARAFEELY.com. LinkedIn, I'm under linkedin.com/IN/Ciara Feely. Or I think you'll put my my newsletter would be a good way. And I'm happy to send people my mighty moves in sales, and that's ciarafeely.com/newsletter.
Thank you. And people can purchase that book through your website?
That's on Amazon. You can get it through my website. Yeah, it's also on Amazon. Steps to Win, or search for Ciara Feely.
Thank you so much today. So today, folks, we were joined by Ciara Feely for sharing and joining us for some entrepreneur wisdom on Talk to the Fedora. We hope this segment has helped you to grow your small business. So please subscribe to our eSAX YouTube channel and check out some of the hundreds of other videos we have for entrepreneurial content. Ciara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks a million. Slán go fóill.